Welcome back. Well, I can't believe I am doing another video. This is the third video on the single coin called the Sacrum and Spear coin, which is Luke Treadwell's name for the coin, which I go along with, which is a much better name for it. So I'm going to be looking at additional meanings on the coin, looking at the front and the back of the coin this time, not just focused on one side. And without further ado, let's get into it. So a lot of the information today comes from this numismatic website, and you can see that this coin was sold back in 2017 for as much as 70 to 80 grand. I believe it was 80 grand it was sold for, actually. Um, so a very rare and expensive coin to get hold of, clearly of great interest to collectors. And there's a description on the website about the coin. So it says, in relation to the obverse, which is the side of the coin given here on the slide, there's an armoured bust to right, holding sheathed sword in right hand, with name of the Sasanian ruler Husro in Pahlavi to right, and Gad Abswat, may his glory increase, to the left. In the border, there's Bismillah la ilaha illa Allah wa hadahu Mahmed Rasul Allah. I don't go along with the Muhammad part there. I think it's imposing meaning onto it. Divided by stars in crescents, except above the bust, where the star in crescent is replaced by a pellet within annulus, which is at the top. Now that pellet within the circle at the top, which I've highlighted in yellow, is very interesting. And I'm throwing out a possibility, and it's totally speculative here. But if it's referring to some place of significance, and if the other side of the coin is referring to places within Jerusalem, it's worth a shot that this might be referring to the Temple Rock, which is enclosed. That could be the meaning behind it. So I'm leaving that there. It's not proven, obviously. It's just I'm just throwing out the possibility. And if we turn then to the other side of the coin, it gives us the following description. So this is the reverse side of the coin. Infield, arch supported on columns, within which is a vertical barbed spear, which has two pennants floating to the left just below the head. To right and left of the columns, Khalifat Allah, Amir al-Mu'minin. To either side of the spear shaft, Nasr Allah. In border, four stars in crescents, with Pahlavi Ab praise at 1 o'clock. Okay, so we have a few interesting things there. So we've got Amir al-Mu'minin, head or commander of the believers. We've got Khalifat Allah. That's going to be of interest. There's actually also the Nasr Allah, which I'll deal with a bit later in the video. Okay, so how can Khalifa mean successor if it is used as Khalifat Allah? Like, how could it be successor of Allah? This is your typical explanation for what Khalifa means. This is like your standard Islamic narrative, if you like. And the main meaning that Muslims give to the word is successor. So here we have in Islam, Khalifa means successor or deputy. So at least they do offer the possibility of deputy here. And it embodies the responsibility of guiding the Muslim community. The Khalifa serves as a spiritual heir to the Prophet, continuing his mission and ensuring unity and righteousness among followers. Additionally, the term reflects the concept of stewardship, indicating that humans are stewards of the earth, responsible for its care and moral guidance. Overall, the Khalifa plays a crucial role in maintaining the teachings and values established by the Prophet. Now, suppose the big danger here is that we take the current meaning of it, superimpose it on that first century, and assume that it means successor and so forth, and particularly the idea of it being the spiritual heir or successor to the prophet. Okay, it may not have that meaning originally. So to get a better understanding of it, we need to turn to Patricia Crone. And before I forget, I want to credit Odin Lafontaine for these suggestions. He referred me to this book, which I've read a few years ago. It was a good reminder. And he referred me to that website that we're referring to as well. I wasn't expecting, as I say, to go back to look at this coin for a third time, but there's interesting details that ought to be looked at. So we're going to focus on the title Caliphate Allah. So from Patricia Crona's book, this is on page 4 of her book, so it's right up near the beginning. We take as our starting point the well-known fact that the Umayyads made use of the title Khalifat Allah, an expression which we, along with many others, understand to mean deputy of God. So straight up from the beginning, she's not buying the successor of God stuff. It means deputy of God. This translation is scarcely in need of much defense. A Khalifa is somebody who stands in the place of another, that is, a deputy or a successor, depending on whether the other is absent or dead. Since the Muslims assumed God to be alive, Khalifat Allah cannot mean God's successor. I think she's been a little bit sarcastic there, but I get the point. However, in order to accommodate the conventional view that the caliphate is succession to Muhammad rather than deputyship on behalf of God, Goldsire construed it as meaning successor of the prophet approved by God, which is a bit of a mental gymnastic, I think. And this interpretation has found favour with some. It might now be defended with reference to Parry's conclusion that Quranically, Khalifa means successor. 2 Quranic verses were customarily invoked by those who called themselves Khalifa Allah. That is, Surah 2:28, in which God announces that I am placing a Khalifa on earth, with reference to Adam, and Surah 38:25, in which he tells David that we have made you a Khalifa on earth. If Parry is right that Khalifa invariably means successor in the Quran, and if the title Khalifa Allah was actually coined with reference to these verses, then the title ought indeed to mean God's successor in the sense of successor appointed by him, as Goldsire suggested, but plainly it did not. Leaving aside the fact that there were exegetes who disagreed with Parry and that the provenance of the title is unknown, the texts leave no doubt that Khalifat Allah, as applied to the head of state, was understood to mean deputy of God. As Watt notes, there are passages in both poetry and prose which militate against Goldsire's interpretation. Paraphrasic titles such as Amin Allah, trustee of God, Ra'i Allah, shepherd of God, Sultan Allah, the authority of God, or Na'ib Allah, lieutenant of God. As you can see, these are all synonyms. Also make it unlikely that Khalifat Allah meant anything but deputy of God. And so does the general tenor of the sources, as will be seen. Moreover, since Uthman, the first caliph for whom the title Khalifat Allah is securely attested, was also known as Amin Allah, there is no reason to assume that Khalifat Allah only acquired its exalted meaning in the course of its evolution. We may take it that it meant deputy of God from the start. And again, this is courtesy of Odin. The 3 titles may be for the caliph, potentially. We're going to be looking at all the possibilities. So one possibility is these 3 titles which are given there, Amir al-Mu'minin, Khalifat Allah, and Nasr Allah, that these all apply perhaps to the caliph. Or, another possibility, is they might all apply to Jesus. considering that the spear and the pellets or the nails are in reference to a particular place where the Holy Cross was located in the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. So that makes sense there. But there are other possibilities. We're laying out all our cards here today, looking at all the possibilities that we can think of, and not necessarily coming to a conclusion on this. All right. So the three titles may be for the Caliph potentially. Amir al-Mu'minin, commander of the believers. I prefer head of the believers. I think commander is too military, and it tends to direct us into a certain narrow sense of the word. I prefer head of the believers as a translation. Khalifat Allah, God's deputy. I go with Patricia Crona in terms of the meaning. And then, as offered here by Odin, a different meaning to the one I have taken from Luke Treadwell is Nasr Allah, meaning God's helper or God's help. Okay, and we can see that there on the bottom right side of this screenshot I've taken from Odin's work. Okay. Now, I do want to remind ourselves that Treadwell offers a different translation, and I haven't made up my mind which is the correct one. Maybe there's a possibility that both are potential, but in any case, we have Nasr and Allah here. Could be Nashir Allah or Nasara Allah or Nashara Allah, perhaps. Victory of God, or may God give assistance. Okay, so here we've got victory of God, or may God give assistance. The second part is very similar to the idea of God's help. So I think it's somewhere there, victory or help. Okay, as I say, I can't determine which it is, and I do depend on linguists to kind of help me here to come to a decision on which it would be. But all we can do is then look at all the other contextual information, see if we can lean one way or the other in terms of what it might mean. So in this context, it would be making a statement about the significance of the objects referenced, the sacrum and the spear, which appears to be more apt than merely giving additional appellations for the caliph. I think that, to me, sounds right. However, if Odin's rendering is right, another possibility is offered. So we're going to look at both. We're going to be fair on this. If you haven't seen the last video in relation to this, it's really important that you see it so that all of this makes sense. The one that is referenced as the 5 wounds. So if you look back, see that video before continuing so that you understand that there is a kind of religious meaning to one side of the coin that is worth knowing before you see the rest of this video. So with that out of the way, let's continue. Now, what about this, that Adam is a Khalifat Allah? Patricia Crone notes that one Quranic reference, Surah 2:28, refers to Adam as the Khalifat Allah. So she says, 2 Quranic verses were customarily invoked by those who call themselves Khalifat Allah. That is 2:28, in which God announced that I'm placing a Khalifa on earth with reference to Adam. Okay, so that's one sense of who is referred to here as Khalifa Allah. It's not the Khalifa Allah, it's one of God's deputies, okay, Adam. Now, what about the other one? So we're thinking about the Nasr Allah, okay, God's helper. Who is God's helper? I'm going to suggest that one possibility is it's a reference to Eve or Mary. So if we look at Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. So it's a helper created by God. So therefore, Eve is God's helper, i.e. the helper created by God for Adam. So there's a connection there between Adam and Eve in these titles. Is that a coincidence? Am I reading too much into it? You know, it seems that fits very nicely there, doesn't it? And we also have to consider the new Eve. So we have the old Adam, the new Adam. Obviously, Jesus is the new Adam. Mary is the new Eve. So there's a parallel as well. So that's worth considering. So if we look at Luke 1:38, it says, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord, Dule Kyrion," or Kyriou, perhaps you might pronounce it as. Mary refers to herself as God's helper, the handmaid of the Lord. So there we have two references to a helper and God's helper, and they are connected. You have Eve and Mary. So, in summary, then, on the coin we have Khalifat Allah, God's deputy, which the Quran identifies in one case to be Adam. And of course, Jesus is the new Adam, so it has the double possibility, so it can refer to Jesus or Adam. And then Nasr Allah can also similarly refer to Eve and the new Eve, Mary, so God's helper. So that's interesting. So you have Adam and Eve, Jesus and Mary, potentially, which of course makes a lot of sense if this side of the coin is referencing the crucifixion with the spear and the nails and so forth, because very much Jesus and Mary are part of that. Yeah. And obviously, the tree of the Garden of Eden is the old tree. The cross is the new tree. So you can see how all of this fits in a certain theology. Okay. So we've got three titles there. Commander of the Believers. We have a reference potentially to Adam or Jesus there in the Khalifat Allah, and a reference to Eve or Mary in the Nasr Allah. And I would point out it's kind of a bit messy, which I suppose theology can be a bit messy because it's dealing with symbolism and mythologies and analogies and all sort of things, and things don't necessarily fit nice and neatly. But the bit that I don't find very satisfactory is if Khalifat Allah is referencing Jesus, then surely Amir al-Mu'minin is a distinct person from Jesus then, but Amir al-Mu'minin fits for Jesus and it fits for the Caliph, because Jesus is the head of the believers, the head of the body of Christ, head of the church, so it fits for Jesus. It could fit as well for the Caliph. So maybe that's what it is. It's parallels in each case. But it's kind of a bit messy because it's not very neat. It's not distinct there, because you have the second one could also be applied to Jesus as well. In fact, the third one, God's helper, Nasr Allah, could also refer to Jesus as well. So maybe all three of them could refer to Jesus. As you can see, it's a bit messy. It's not very neat. But there you go. I suppose it was a brilliant concept in terms of coin design. Okay, so in summary, it's about salvation history. That would be one way that side of the coin could be interpreted. Now, we're going to look at the obverse of the coin here, and we go back to the website. And it says, the figure on the obverse, whom Treadwell identified as being the caliph, wears a peculiar type of headdress, has cross hatching across his breast to represent a different type of dress from the norm, and rather awkwardly carries a sheathed sword. Now, the problem with Treadwell identifying this person as the caliph is the fact that Khosrow II is written to his right. Doesn't fit very well with the idea of being the caliph, so that's a bit messy. Treadwell notes that the figure on the reverse of the standing caliph drachma, like that on the obverse of the gold and copper standing caliph types, similarly carries a sheathed sword, and he therefore suggests that this feature identifies the Mirab and Anaza bust as that of the caliph also, which is the Mirab and Anaza bust is basically this coin here that we're looking at here, which I prefer to call the Sacrum and spear coin, following from Luke Treadwell's description. He has no explanation for the design of the crown or helmet, beyond noting that it does not look like any other crown seen on the coinage of any Sasanian ruler. As for the crosshatch pattern on the figure's breast, Treadwell's explanation is that this is chiefly an artistic rather than a naturalistic feature designed to allow the sheathed sword to feature more prominently. Unfortunately, neither the cross-hatching nor the headgear looks even remotely like the dress of the standing caliph figure, and so much as with the problematic legends, these features do nothing to support the suggestion that the Mirab and Anaza drachma was designed to improve and rectify the standing caliph type. So it's all a bit messy. So there's confusion about the crown or helmet there. One thing I would point out is the crown on the head looks very much like a menorah turned upside down. The beard and what looks like a three-part earring. One suggestion I have is perhaps that those dots might be a reference to a star constellation like Virgo, which is a wild one, but I can't think of a better explanation at the minute for the particular strange shape. It doesn't match with the early Sasanian coins that tended to have a more clear image of the beard there. So that's that. That's as far as I can go with that one. The arms and particularly the forearms, they're kind of odd looking. They look almost like frogs' legs. They're very peculiar. And as I say, the crosshatch, what is that about? Not sure. No idea. So there's a lot of mysteries in this one. Again, from the website, looking again at the Mirab and Anaza drachma, we see something similar here. The bust is armoured, helmeted, and wearing a sword, while the verse depicts a barbed spear accompanied by the phrase, "Victory from God." Wherever and whenever this fascinating coin was struck, its overtly military imagery suggests that it may have been intended to play a practical role as a military coinage just as much as playing its part in a religious war of images. Okay? So it's a bit of a mystery. It's very hard to date it. And what adds to the confusion is the fact that Khosrow II is referenced on the coin. There we have it. One mystery remains, which is why would it make reference to Khosrow II so late if it was produced in the 690s or thereabouts, or in the early 700s? Why would they mention Khosrow II? Surely he would have lost significance for everyone, really. So that's it. Tell us what you think. Leave your comments below, and I will see you all very soon. Bye bye.